Welcome to All About Capital Campaigns, a podcast that provides fuel for your nonprofit's growth. Each week, hosts Andrea Kilstedt and Amy Eisenstein, co-founders of the Capital Campaign Toolkit, provide practical tips about raising more money for your nonprofit organization. The Capital Campaign Toolkit is a support system for nonprofit leaders who are running capital campaigns. At capitalcampaigntoolkit.com, you can download a step-by-step guide for your capital campaign and get many other free resources. This podcast is recorded on a live webinar every Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. You can join the live session and get your questions answered by signing up today at toolkittalks.com.
So today we're going to talk about the quiet phase, or at least start talking about the quiet phase. So I'm going to give you some highlights about the quiet phase. Is it really quiet? You may have heard of it as the silent phase, which is even quieter than the quiet phase. But really, the important distinction between the quiet phase and the public phase is who you are asking for gifts. So in the quiet phase or the silent phase, you are asking 3 groups of donors for gifts, and that's it. So you are asking your leadership level donors, the people with the potential to give the biggest gifts to your campaign. That's group 1. Group 2 is your board members. So every board member needs to be asked and hopefully make their pledge during the quiet phase. And the third group is other campaign volunteers. And so those are the only people that you are asking for gifts in the quiet phase of your campaign. And hopefully those 3 groups, the leadership level donors, your top donors, your board members, and your other campaign volunteers, or all your campaign volunteers, hopefully those 3 groups of people will get you to 60, 70, 80% of your goal. And then you can bring your campaign public, which is when you ask the community to join in and participate. So the real question on the table is, how quiet is the quiet phase? And what the heck do we mean by that? So there's a lot of confusion surrounding the quiet phase and what are you supposed to do in the quiet phase, and who knows you're in a campaign and what's happening and who do you tell and who can you tell what. So here's the deal. You can talk all you want about the project and the vision in the quiet phase. You can put it on your website. You can announce it from the hilltops. What you can't do is talk about your campaign or a campaign goal. What you want to do is talk about the project, right? People may even know in the community that you're building a building, or that you've purchased a site, or that you're developing programs. And you want to start that buzz and that community talking about the exciting vision of this project that's coming or developing at your organization. But what you don't want to do is talk specifically about the campaign or your fundraising efforts for it, or a specific goal, other than to say that we're working on it, right? And you'll hear more soon, more information to come. You don't want to have a campaign brochure during the quiet phase. And this confounds so many people who believe that the first thing that they need to do if they want to have a campaign is create a campaign brochure. Well, you don't need to do that. The campaign brochure, save it until the end of your campaign, till the public phase of your campaign. So you won't even create a campaign brochure because you're not asking the general public for gifts until you've raised 60, 70, or even 80% of your dollars. And that's when you go public and invite the community. So it's really about who are you fundraising from and when. So hopefully, sometimes Andrea is more articulate than I am in these areas. So hopefully that makes good sense. But so let's see, what else did I want to tell you? So in the quiet phase, when you're not talking about the campaign specifically or how much you're raising, except for with the few select donors that you're asking for from gifts, obviously you're going to be telling those three groups of people how much you hope to be raising. So you're going to start with what we call a working goal in the quiet phase. You're going to talk to those three special select groups of people that you're talking to individually and quietly in the quiet phase and asking them for early gifts. You are going to talk about a working goal. This is the goal we're working towards. But you're not going to have a final campaign goal or an official campaign goal until you go public and you've already raised 70 or 80% of your campaign goal. And that's when you're going to put it in a brochure. That's when you're going to have a press release about the campaign goal, that you're officially in a campaign, and invite the rest of the community to give. Okay, let's see. During the quiet phase, you will talk about why your organization needs to grow without a specific dollar amount, without specifically asking the general public for money. You're going to talk about that the board is making plans and in the early stages of a campaign and campaign planning. That's what you're going to talk about in terms of money. You're going to be general and vague in the quiet phase, except for with the few people that you are asking for those leadership level gifts. Okay, good. So I'm just peeking in the chat now. So Kristen Rack, who is one of our toolkit advisors and consultant toolkit users, is saying, don't let the board skip the quiet phase. So I'm not even seeing what started that conversation, but I just want to give that 2 thumbs up. Kristen, thank you for adding that. Your board must be asked, and hopefully you have 100% board participation in the quiet phase of your campaign. You don't want to go public without full board support and participation. And it's possible that a board member or two will resign, hopefully before you start the quiet phase of your campaign if they're not on board. So anyways, okay, let's see. Make sure that if you're putting questions in, that they're actually in the Q&A box. The chat box goes by so quickly that that sometimes I can't see all the questions. So if you put a question in the chat box, do open up your Q&A box so that I can see it. All right. Jennifer is asking, what about a new facility site plan brochure? And I have to admit, Jennifer, I'm not totally sure what you mean by that. I mean, if you're talking about blueprints or drawings, you're going to show that to your leadership level donors, sure, but it doesn't have to be a formal brochure. It doesn't have to be well laid out. It can be a folder of information. I'm not sure what you mean. If anybody else wants to weigh in on if they've done any sort of facility site plan brochure, you can. But if you want to give me more information about that, that would be great. Okay, Susie is asking, do you develop a campaign name in the quiet phase? Let me turn it over to the chat. What do you guys think? We've got a lot of really experienced campaign consultants and advisors in the chat. And if you've been through multiple campaigns and you're at a nonprofit, how important do you think a campaign name is in the quiet phase? What do you think? Gary, thank you. You're saying, let it develop. Don't move too fast. I mean, a lot of what you're doing in the early phases of your campaign is draft. Certainly in the feasibility study phase on anything that you're sharing with donors, you want to have draft on it because you're collecting feedback in that early planning and feasibility study phase. You're testing themes and campaign names and things like that. Is a campaign name gonna raise you money? I could go either way on it, honestly. Amy's saying we did develop the name early. It was probably more important to us, to our team, than it was to the donors. Don't spend too much time worrying about the name unless you're really going to make large donor installations with this. Yeah. I mean, which you wouldn't do till way at the end anyways. So Derry's saying it's less important in the quiet phase than in the public. Yeah, you can ask your three lead groups about the name as an engagement tool. It can develop, and that's a reason actually not to have a campaign brochure too early, so that you can make changes and adjustments as your campaign goes on. You want to have a theme for your campaign, and I'm sure lots of people will weigh in on that. All right. So, okay. So Jennifer, you're clarifying your earlier question, a brochure that captures the need for the new building and what the building will look like. Like I said, it's not a brochure. It's just a folder of information. Yes, you can have photocopies of the blueprint of your building. You don't have to have a beautiful rendering. You don't have to have a formally laid out brochure. You shouldn't have till the end, because things are going to change. And what happens these days when you print brochures? The next day they're out of date, right? And you've gone to the printer and all that trouble. So just have some material in a folder, be able to print it out and revise it every time you go talk to another donor or stakeholder. All right. Gary, yeah, things will change. Thank you for chiming in on that. All right. So listen, I'm happy I see we've got questions piling up in the question box, which is great. I'm going to go through them, but I want to remind everybody that we don't have to stay on the topic of quiet phase. It was just to sort of jumpstart the conversation and kick us off. But now we can absolutely have a conversation, anything fundraising related and anything campaign related. All right, Michelle says, when thinking about the overall funding needed, do you include the amount the nonprofit will contribute, funds from sale of existing buildings? Yeah, that is a great question, Michelle. So your campaign goal doesn't have to be the entire amount of the project, because you may get funding from other places. The organization may have funds that they're contributing. You may be taking a mortgage. So the campaign goal is the fundraising goal that you need to get to your goal. And then you can talk about what the whole project costs as well. Anybody have any other thoughts on that? Feel free to put them in the chat box as always. Okay, Rachel, we love newbie level questions, so don't ever apologize. If you have the question, lots of people have the question, so don't worry about that. All right, so Rachel's saying, what is considered a full board member support? Generally, what level should a board member give before asking a top donor? We've been working with family board, upper middle class. Great question. That is not a newbie question at all. Everybody I talk to has that question. And the reality is that there's unfortunately no answer to that question, because every board is vastly different. And there's no specific percentage or dollar amount that a board should give. What you want is that every single board member gives a significant and meaningful and thoughtful gift for their own personal budget, and that they dig deep. Often in a campaign, we will ask for gifts used with assets. And so it's not checkbook giving. It is, stocks or plan gifts or real estate or other assets. And so, every board member should make a thoughtful and meaningful gift, whatever that means for their own personal family budget. And sometimes it's 10% of the campaign goal. Sometimes it's 50% of the campaign goal that comes from the board. And it varies very widely from organization to organization. So let's see, I want to get and read some of these chats because we've got great conversation going on in here. If you have experience with getting your board on board and how you spoke to them in terms of the board goal, you may set a board goal of trying to get to $1 million or, but you'll set it based on who's on your board. But I'd love to hear about it in the chat. All right. So listen, Dana says, everyone in town knows we bought a building during COVID. Everyone knows it needs to be rehabbed before it can open. So no one will be surprised as we launch a capital campaign. Exactly. You're exactly right. Amy, in reference to the site plan brochure, we found it was nice to have pictures, both blueprint and architectural renderings for donors to see. Some donors hopefully, who will be very visual. Absolutely. But you can put them in a folder of information that you bring from donor to donor or to each donor. You don't have to do it in a fancy brochure. All right, let's see. Amy adds, save paper and use technology when you can. You can bring a laptop or an iPad. We had some large scale architectural renderings, like poster board size for big presentations to donors at large scale asks. Yeah. All right. And Dana's saying about the board question. For our board, we're asking each board member to give what they can. We're not stipulating how much, since we also have different demographics on our board. I keep stressing that we want to be able to say that we have 100% of our board is on board. Yeah, good. Excellent. Okay. The next question comes from Rob, who's asking, what happens if you get out of the quiet phase too quickly before reaching your goal? Talking about specific dollar goals, not focusing on targeted lists of large donors. How do you pull back and get, oh no, Rob. Okay, so I think if I'm reading your question correctly, you went public too early, right? So how do you get out of, what happens if you get out of the quiet phase too quickly before reaching your goal? Yeah, so here's the challenge, right? So what you can do is use, well, not to Rob specifically, but for everybody else who's still working on the planning of their campaign and through the quiet phase, use your gift range chart as your guide. That is going to be your campaign muse, right? Your campaign guide is your gift range chart. Now, for those of you that are newer to capital campaigns, a gift range chart is a chart that shows how many gifts you need at what levels to get to your goal. So, for example, if your goal is $10 million, your top gift might be $2 million, which is around 20% of the campaign goal. So you'll need one gift at $2 million and then two gifts at $1 million each. So the first three gifts add up to $4 million, right? The first gift is $2 million. Then you need two $1 million gifts. And then you might say you need four $500,000 gifts, right? So I'm getting to the goal quickly here, but basically what you're going to find is that if you don't get some of those top gifts and you're not following your gift range chart, you're going to need too many gifts at the bottom of the pyramid. You can't possibly make up for gifts at the top of your gift table, gift chart, gift pyramid. It's called lots of different things. With gifts at the bottom. And so what you're going to find is, if oftentimes what happens is that board members or executive directors are ready to send out a mailing or ask the public for gifts. But what you're going to find is that gifts in $50 increments or $100 increments or even $1,000 increments, you can't have enough donors at the bottom of your pyramid to make up for the gifts at the top of your pyramid. If you do, then your goal would be much higher. So it never makes sense, or, it's really impossible to say, oh yes, we can have a campaign where we raise our goal in, $500 gifts or $1,000 gifts or $50 gifts. If that's the case, then we would argue that your goal should have been significantly higher, because first you're going to go to those major donors who are going to get you way up. Okay, so back to Rob's question. That was sort of a roundabout way of cautioning everybody about making sure that you're using the gift range chart as the roadmap for your campaign. And you don't want to go public to ask for those. That's when you're asking the community to chime in and support your campaign and get you over that finish line. What you're doing in the public phase, in essence, is saying, okay, we're 70% of the way to your goal. Oh, here's Andrea. Hi, Andrea. All right. So I'll finish my thought. I'm answering Rob's question here at the top of the Q&A box. So in the public phase, you're inviting the community to get you to your finish line. You're saying, oh, we raised 75% of our goal, and now we need you to help get us over the finish line. So, all right, Andrea's joining us after doing a fabulous board training, I am sure. So give her a minute to catch her breath. But Andrea, Rob is in a pickle because he wants to know what happens if you get out of the quiet phase too quickly before reaching, that 70, 80% of their goal. And so how does he pull back into the quiet phase if they've perhaps jumped the gun? So, I was talking about gift pyramids and using it for a roadmap for everybody else. But it is a pickle to go into the quiet phase and then have to or the public phase, and then go back and say, okay, now in essence, we're stuck. We've raised, maybe half of our goal, and we've sort of asked everybody we thought we were going to ask, and we went public. And now we still have half the goal to raise. I'm guessing that's what's happening, Rob, something like that. You want to chime in?
Sigh.
Yeah, sigh. Exactly. It's sigh.
Yeah, I need to know much more, but the questions that come to my mind are, how long has it been since, that you've been doing this campaign? If it's been years and years and that your campaign is sort of stagnant, you need to go and look at your gift range chart. And maybe this is sort of what you just said. You need to look at your gift range chart and see if you have some lead gifts out there still to get. And if you don't, then you have to celebrate success for where you are. You have to come up with a new goal. You have to lower your goal. You have to bring the thing to a close. Right? You don't want to go ahead if you've got no way to get yourself to success. So then you have to redefine success.
And that is why you don't want to go public too early. You don't want to go public too early with your campaign goal until you're very confident that you can get there, because then you're in a pickle. You've announced this big goal and you're sort of stuck at 60 or 70% or 50% or whatever it is. And there's really no way to the goal. And so when you do that quietly, get to 60, 70%, with a working goal, right? This is the goal you're working towards. It's almost a draft goal. And then at the end of the quiet phase, when you've asked those key groups of donors individually, and then you can say, you know what, we think that we can get to the goal that we set out for. And now we can announce it publicly. Or, you know what, some of those big key gifts that we were hoping for didn't come in. So now it's time, before we've gone public with our campaign goal, to scale back the goal and scale back the project. And you can go back to your big donors and say what happened and say, listen, we're going to announce a different goal than we shared with you because we worked towards it and we needed to scale back the project. Unless they're going to come in with another big gift, which sometimes they do.
Yes. So Rob, is it you say I inherited a campaign when I started last year? Is that Rob's?
Yeah.
That's the Rob. Okay.
Yes, that's the Rob.
Yes. So Rob, I think if you might consider pulling your lead gift committee back together for a meeting to look at prospects, to look at the gift range chart and see who is still out there. See if there are some other lead gifts that are to be raised. But you shouldn't do that yourself. You should pull those people together. Since you weren't working on the front part of this campaign, you have everything to gain by pulling the people together to say, all right, we need to make some decisions. They need to be based on whether there are people there we can ask for the large gifts that we need to be successful. And if not, then we need to come up with a strategy. So I think you might consider something like that, Rob. Don't hold it all on your shoulders. You just came into this mess, right? So you need to get them to help you get out of this mess. And there are, it's amazing. Actually, if you proclaim something to be successful, people believe it to be successful. Nobody wants anything to fail. Right. So even if you haven't gotten to the goal, say, create a new goal. Say by the end of the year, we will have raised X number of dollars by this. Oh, hang on a second, 1 second. Sarah, I'll call you back.
Okay. Yes. Setting a new goal. Excellent.
Set a new goal by the end of the year, we will have gotten to, I don't know where you are, and we will have gotten to the next million up. Right. And then declare success.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Very few people will ask you what happened to the original goal. People want to be successful.
Talk about what you have been able to do, talk about what has been accomplished, and thank everybody for participating and wrap it up, right? Even if there are a few people at the center, but that's why you're going to call them together and say, look, this is the pickle we're in. This is the situation. What are your thoughts and ideas? At this point, it doesn't seem realistic to move ahead. So how do we wrap up gracefully and then maybe start over in 6 months or whatever it could be?
Well,
all right.
Mary's asked just a follow-on question to that. Is it better to extend a deadline or change the goal? Well, if you've been extending the deadline for 4 years and you've got no way to point towards getting to the goal, you better change the goal. But if you still have a whole bunch of donors who could give at the large gift level, then you should extend the deadline a little, but don't extend it forever. It'll just get tired and everybody's going to think you're failing.
Okay. So, and Mary's asking that in the chat box, is it better to extend a deadline or change the goal? And if extending the deadline will get you to where you need to be, if you have reason to believe that, then sure, extend the deadline a little. But if you have to extend the deadline by 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, and it's just, you have no reason to believe that you're actually going to get there, then extending the deadline doesn't do anything for you. But if you have real reason to believe that extending the deadline will help, by all means.
What's that old expression, Amy? Hope is not a strategy. Hope is not a strategy. Prayer is not a plan, or hope is not a plan. Prayer is not a strategy. I think.
All right. Somebody will know and tell us in the chat.
Know, right.
We all know what you're getting at. All right. And Gary's commenting from an earlier conversation that one of the buildings he raised $7 million for, we changed the design at least 3 times before forged ahead with the final design, which is why you don't want to print that campaign brochure too early. Another reason why you don't want to is because things change. If your campaign's happening over the span of 3 years, a lot can change in that time period. So everything's a draft until it's final. All right. So Andrea, Michelle asked this question, and I don't know if I answered it in the way that you would have answered it. So we're going to ask it again and see what you say and see if we answer it the same way. Michelle's asking, when thinking about the overall funding needed, do you include the amount the nonprofit will contribute, funds from the sale of an existing building, for example? So is the campaign goal the total project goal or the funds you need to raise goal?
Right. They're 2 different goals. One is the total project goal and one is the campaign goal.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's some blurriness between them. But for the most part, I encourage you to be pretty clear, right? Say this is a $20 million project. X, 4 million is going to come from the sale of a property. 2 million are going to come from tax credits, new market tax credits. 3 million are going to come from cash reserves that we have on hand, and I've lost track of the numbers, and 8 million are going to come from philanthropic contributions.
Right. So the campaign goal is what you need to fundraise.
Yes, exactly. Good. Is that what you said?
It is what I said. You said it a little better than you provided an articulate example, but I did. That is what I said. All right, good. All right, Pamela, looking for ideas on cultivation opportunities. Our province is in lockdown mode again. All right, so let's turn it over to the chat to see what you're doing to cultivate donors these days. But I think that, one thing that we've learned, Pamela, over the last year and a half is that virtual cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship are alive and well and thriving. And so, and cultivation, real cultivation for major gift donors should be done one-on-one anyways. So it's not like big groups. And sure, maybe you want to give a tour, but a virtual tour, how can you convert to online? But I would love to know from people in the chat how they're cultivating. Andrea, what would you say about cultivation during lockdown?
What would I say about cultivation during lockdown? Well, I can describe a wonderful cultivation event I went to in Maine during lockdown that was in person, actually. It was fantastic. It was at Wolf's Neck Farm, and they did a tomato tasting. Now, they actually got people together. It was under a tent. It was outside. They had maybe 10 picnic tables. They had 2 people per picnic table, people who had come together. They had a farmer come in and discuss each of the tomato varieties that they had people tasting. So it was a very successful cultivation event that was tied into what Wolf's Neck Farm does. It was very safe. So I think there are some in-person cultivation things you might be able to do that you really need to take seriously, keeping people safe. But you shouldn't just give up on in-person stuff. You just need to think about them differently. So that's one thing to do. The other thing that strikes me, Amy, is that I'm always amazed at how much of a relationship you can build with people just through email. Right? Just you. It's amazing what a personal form of, or texts even, right?
It can be, right? This is not a bulk email.
It's not always, and the bulk emails are not, but it can be incredibly, and small Zoom meetings can be incredibly effective.
Yeah.
But one-on-one emails, they can be wonderful. I mean, we tend to think bulk email, which doesn't do much of anything, but why not identify 20 of your top donor prospects and ask them a question on email?
Well, I was going to say just that. Cultivation is about you learning things about your donors. So get out of the headspace of it's about, just educating people about your organization or your programs or services. Sure, it's that too, but it's how do they feel about your programs and services? What do they want to accomplish philanthropically? So in any format where you can ask questions and learn things about your donors, you're doing good cultivation. I think that is absolutely right. Okay. But email, here's the test for your email, your cultivation by email. If you could swap out anybody's name and have the email go and it wouldn't matter, it's not a good email. So mention the last time they were there, something they volunteered to do, something that interests them specifically. If they know that the email was written with them in mind, it's going to be a good cultivation tool. If you can send the exact same email to all 30 of your top donors, it's not a good cultivation email, right? That's your test. Yeah,
that's a great test. So Miriam's asked an interesting question here. which is that she's gotten some pushback on her working goal because it includes the value of in-kind contributions like professional services and gifts of land. How do they explain to donors and prospective donors that they've included those values in the working goal? And Miriam, of course you should include those things, because if people weren't donating those services, you would have to pay for them. But it is helpful if you can talk about how you are valuing them, right? And that, how much they would cost you, right? The people, in particular, in-kind donations, contractors often give in-kind donations, but they have to be evaluated. You have to actually look carefully at what it would cost to get them. And then there needs to be some kind of a more formal transaction between who's ever giving the in-kind contribution and the organization. So you have records of those if they are contributions, right? You need records of them. But know that you are in good company, that counting in-kind contributions. I mean, in fact, if you look at campaign policies, there is a fair amount in there about how to value in-kind contributions, because they're very common in campaigns, right? Professional services are a little more dicey. You have to be careful that there really is an equivalency in terms of what people are contributing. The easier way to do it with professional services is to pay them and have them make a gift. But if someone is giving all the bathroom fixtures or all the air conditioning for your new building, or if a contractor is actually giving stuff of specific value that your contractor would have to buy, that's easy to put a price on.
The next two questions are both about feasibility studies. So let's talk about that for a few minutes. Christine is asking, talk more about how a feasibility study works. And Christy's asking, at which phase and to whom do we need to conduct the feasibility study? Good questions. You want to start that, or you want me to start?
Why don't you start? I'm a little distracted still.
Yeah. Okay. So listen, at the toolkit, at the Capital Campaign Toolkit, we like to talk about three possibilities or three methods or styles of feasibility study. All of them are at the very, very beginning of your campaign, still when you're in sort of campaign planning or pre-campaign planning even. And the goal of a feasibility study or fundraising feasibility study, I should say, because there's project feasibility studies and other kinds of feasibility studies, but we're talking about a fundraising feasibility study, is really to test the case for support that you've developed about why donors should give and why they should care. So to test the case for support and your working goal with your leadership level donors, your best potential donors and community leaders. And so the most traditional method of a feasibility study is when you hire an outside consultant who goes in and talks to 20, 30, or 40 of your biggest potential supporters and asks them for feedback on that case for support and the working goal, and they provide recommendations on how to move forward to your board. Now, the other end of that spectrum, lots of organizations opt not to hire an outside consultant to do that. And they do what we would consider sort of a do-it-yourself feasibility study, where they go out and talk to 10 or 15 of their biggest potential donors about the campaign plans and get feedback before they move forward. The third sort of hybrid method of the two is what we call at the Capital Campaign Toolkit a guided feasibility study. That is where the leaders of your organization go out and have the conversations with your donors, and we guide you through the process. We help you with your case for support and determining your working goal. We help you figure out who should be included in those interviews. We give you the questions and coach you on how to do those interviews and how to collect the feedback and analyze it and then co-author and co-present recommendations and a report to your board. And the reason that we feel that that's the best option is that you are developing relationships with your biggest potential campaign donors prior to asking for a gift. And you have an outside consultant sort of verifying and validating the recommendations and report to the board. So it sort of ticks all the boxes in a traditional feasibility study. All right, let us move on unless you have something to add, Andrea, about that. We've got lots of good questions coming in. One of the questions that jumping out to me is from John, who says, what do you do if you just don't seem to be able to get the big donors first? That is a great question, John. And, unfortunately, that may tell you something about your campaign goal. Right? If you can't get any big donors to say, yes, we're going to spearhead this campaign and we have so much confidence in your plan and your organization and the case for support that we're willing to commit early in order to motivate others, you might have to go back to the drawing board and say, something about this plan isn't motivating donors. Now, there are a few big donors who want to get you over the finish line, who are going to wait until the end. But you've got to have a good, solid handful of people who are willing to go out on a limb early for you in big ways. Otherwise, that may be a big red flag about your campaign.
Yeah, that certainly is correct. And don't underestimate how long it takes to bring those large gifts in. They don't happen overnight. They don't work that you just send out a letter or make a phone call and there they are. They often take months to bring them in, which is why the quiet phase of the campaign is so much longer than the public phase. So the quiet phase of a campaign can take 12 months, right? Just to bring in 10 gifts. So you can't look and say, okay, well, we just have 10 gifts to ask for in the quiet phase of the campaign, the 10 big gifts. We're going to send a proposal to all of them and they're going to sign on the dotted line and we're going to be done. Well, in all my years of campaigning, that has never happened. So you need to be patient, but you also need to set it up. And if you don't see that those gifts are there, as Amy said, you need to rejig your goal. You need to lower your goal.
And I'm wondering if perhaps you are one of the organizations, and we hear this all the time, that skipped a feasibility study altogether. You didn't have an outside consultant do it. You didn't do any sort of do-it-yourself leadership donor conversations or interviews early before going out and asking for gifts. You maybe certainly didn't do a guided feasibility study with us. And so what often happens when organizations get into a pickle is that the first time they're telling their donors about this big project is when they're asking for these big gifts. And then the donor is not ready to make a big commitment because it's the first time they're hearing about this. So one of the big reasons to do a feasibility study is that you get those leadership level donors thinking about and excited about your project usually months before you go back and ask them for a gift. And they're part of your insider circle. Yes, John's saying there was no feasibility study. I knew there wasn't. And so, Andrea knew too, because the donors aren't ready to give. And it does take, if you want people to commit to $1 million, $500,000, multi-million-dollar gifts, it takes some months or even a year to think about that and figure out how they're going to do it, why they're going to do it. It's not a quick decision for most people. So, yeah, excellent. John, you need to, if you want us to come in and help educate your board and staff leadership, we would be happy to do that. That is one of the key roles that we play is, Andrea was just doing a board training today. And that is where she educates the board on what to expect, what their roles and responsibilities are, how a campaign works. And so you definitely want to do that. And we would definitely be happy to come in and do a board training or even sit down and talk with some of your key leaders about how a campaign works. I did want to go back and comment on something that Andrea said quickly earlier, and I don't know if everybody caught it, but the quiet phase is the longest phase of your campaign. And I think, and the public phase could be one of the shortest. And I think that probably will come as a surprise to most people. But if you think about how much you're raising in the quiet phase, 70% of your goal, perhaps, or 80%, you should spend a significantly longer amount of time on those gifts and raising that money. But the real shocker, I think, to most people when we show them our campaign timeline is that the public phase is only, 3 months, maybe 6 months. It's not a year. It's not 2 years. You are almost at the end of your goal. Everybody's going to be rah, rah. It's to get you over your finish line. So 3 to 6 months max in that public phase. If it drags on for a year or 2 years, there's an issue.
We've had several of our campaign advisors do guided feasibility studies with organizations where the people in the organization have gone and talked to their largest donors, and they've come back and we've helped them put a report together. Right? I mean, the Finger Lakes Museum, we've had several of them, and what happens is that even then they come back and they know how much donors or the range in which donors say they will consider giving. They take that to the board. The board approves a goal, which is based on reality that they know. And then they go out and start one by one talking to those donors. And what they found, of course, is that the donors are happy to step up and to give in the range they indicated they were going to give. Right. So our advisors have had remarkable success in guiding people through a process that doesn't leave them in this great question mark of how much money can we raise and are the donors going to be there? And it sort of sets the ground for them to go back and talk to their donors. I mean, it's one of the wonderful surprises of the guided feasibility study process.
So I just want to let everybody know that we just created a 5-minute video that explains what a guided feasibility study is and why it's useful and important on our website. So if you go to capitalcampaigntoolkit.com and hover over, I think it's services, and the drop-down box will say feasibility study. If you have a skeptical executive director or board members or want a very clear, concise explanation of what a guided feasibility study is and what a feasibility study is in general, go to the Capital Campaign Toolkit website and hover over services and click on that feasibility study page, and you will get a great 5-minute explainer video.
We have a couple of questions that I think we can knock off pretty easily. So Jennifer has asked, and her question is at the top of my screen, how do you include capital grants in a campaign? For example, you're applying for capital grants during the quiet phase. Well, if you get them, you would count them. Right? That's really simple. Grants, capital campaigns include grants, right? They include grants from foundations. Some campaigns include grants from public sector, funding. So by all means, apply for them. And when you get them, you will count them. And that's a great thing to do and to know.
Yes. And Jennifer is also asking, does the 60 to 80% of funds raised in the quiet phase count pledges? And absolutely. Yes, of course. It's not just cash in the door, because everybody in that leadership level phase will probably do a 3-year pledge, which we recommend. We want them to give the biggest gift possible. So we don't want it to be just in 1 year. We want it to be over 3 years, which is fine. And yes, of course, that gets you to 70% of your goal.
So let's see. Any advice? Jacqueline has asked, any advice having an initial meeting with a potential campaign chairman or co-chairman? Yes, I do have some juicy advice for you. Before, if you know who the right person would be, who the perfect person would be to be your campaign chair, talk to a variety of other people who are close into your community or who are powerful in your community, and ask them what they think of that person. Let's say it's Mary Smith, right? Go and talk to several other people and say, we're considering Mary Smith as our campaign chair. What do you think of that idea? And if all of those people say, yes, Mary Smith is perfect, then when you go to Mary Smith, you can say, Mary, we've been asking a lot of people who would be a great chair for our campaign. And guess what? They all pointed to you. And here are the reasons they thought you would be great. Now, that's a much stronger ask than if you just go to Mary and say, Mary, we need a campaign chair. You're right here. Wouldn't you do it? Right? I mean, that's so you need to be strategic in how you approach people and make the ask so that they're going to want to say yes, because it feels like people really want them to be in that spot, and it's an important spot. So
excellent. So Gary is saying, make sure you have a policy of accepting pledges, a reaction or response to an earlier question. Yes, Gary, thank you for pointing that out. And I just want to remind everybody that in the Capital Campaign Toolkit, which is for our paying members, we of course have sample campaign policies, draft template campaign policies, so that our members, our Capital Campaign Toolkit subscribing members, have access to all those samples and templates and things. But it's a good reminder that you want to have campaign policies that talks about what kind of pledges you accept over what period of time, how they get paid, and all that good stuff.
Jacqueline, let me just follow up one more about this asking someone to chair your campaign, because that's so important and it's so hard to get really good chairs. Right? So you need to have several things in mind. One is that you should really think carefully about what that person would bring to the table and be ready to say it specifically, right? Say, here's what I know about you, Susan, right? You follow through. You are well respected in this community. You yourself are a generous donor, and you have been a supporter of our organization for some time. You are a leader. And if you lead this campaign, the campaign is likely to succeed. So and don't just make it up. It's got to be real. Whatever it is you're saying to Susan has to be real about Susan. So do your homework so you know why she would be a good campaign chair. And second of all, be sure you have something that tells her what it means and what will be required of her to be your campaign chair, right? You don't want to say, I want you to come and work your finger to the bone for the next, I don't know how many months until we're successful. Nobody's going to say yes to that, right? You need to say, here, it's going to be, 3 meetings a month, and it's going to require this and that. And yes, we are going to come and ask you for a lead gift to be a lead, or whatever it is. Be clear up front, so that Susan's not pledging her life away to you. I mean, people do that badly. So I'm so glad you asked the question.
Excellent. We have
honorary chairs also. Yes.
Yes. Okay, Lynette. Yes. Honorary chairs. Andrea, you're saying yes?
Yes. Okay. Honorary chairs are great, and ask them in the same way. Why should I be your honorary chair? Right? Well, because you're old. No.
Because you have a lot of money, right?
No, right? So you have to really think, when you recruit people, you have to think carefully about them and what they bring to the table. And if they don't bring things to the table, don't recruit them. And if they do, be ready to outline them, including money.
Yeah. So an honorary chair, you might say something to, look, you are a recognized leader in this community, and anything that you're involved with, people flock to. And we know that you care about this cause, or we hope you care about this cause, right? Based on previous conversations. And we would love for you to be representing our campaign. All right. I think we're almost at the top of the hour. We have answered some amazing questions. Always such a great, robust set of questions. And, to someone's earlier point, there are no questions that are too basic. If you have the question, lots of people have the question. So don't ever hesitate to submit the question that you have on your mind. That is exactly why we're here.
Amy, I think there are lots of questions about campaign co-chairs. We might want to start next week's session by talking more about chairs and co-chairs. And there's a lot to talk about, and it makes such a difference. So if you want more information about co-chairs, you can go to the Capital Campaign Masters blog and search for campaign leadership or co-chairs or chairs. I think I've written a lot about that over the years. So
you can also go to the Capital Campaign Toolkit website and sign up for a free strategy session. And
that's true.
We'll talk one-on-one with you
about your chair.
About your chairs. So if you're planning a campaign and have any questions and think you might want some answers just about your campaign, do feel free to go sign up for a strategy session with us. We're happy to talk to you. All right, guys. Thanks as always. It's a pleasure. Andrea, great doing this with you. I was so happy when you joined.
Happy to be here, Amy. It's always a pleasure. And I'm sorry I stuck you out there on your own for a bit this morning. It took a little longer than I expected, but
we did well.
We did well.
All right. Yes. All right. See you next week, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Talk to you soon.
Thanks for joining Amy and Andrea for today's All About Capital Campaigns. To learn more about them and their work together, go to capitalcampaigntoolkit.com.